I am an old man now, my hands shake when I hold this cup of tea, and my eyes are not as strong as they used to be. But there is one memory that is still clear in my heart, the day my daughter was born. It was a cold winter morning. The sky was gray, and I was standing outside the hospital, walking back and forth, praying quietly. When the nurse finally came out and said, "Congratulations, it's a girl," my heart filled with a happiness I had never known before. When I first held her in my arms, she was so tiny, her fingers wrapped around my little finger like she never wanted to let go. At that moment, I promised myself something. I will protect you from every pain in this world. I named her Aisha. From that day on, my life was no longer about me, it was about her smiles, her tiny footsteps running through the house, and her soft voice calling me Abu. She was the light of our home. Every evening when I came back from work, she would run to the door and jump into my arms. "Abu, what did you bring for me today?" she would ask with sparkling eyes. Sometimes it was just a small chocolate, sometimes a balloon, but to her it was the greatest treasure in the world. I thought those moments would last forever. But life had other plans for us. And the day she turned 7 years old, something happened that changed our lives forever. But what happened on her 7th birthday, is something I will never forget. Aisha's 7th birthday was coming, and she had been talking about it for weeks. "Abu, this time I want a big pink cake," she said one evening while sitting beside me. I laughed and nodded. "Of course, princess. The biggest pink cake in the whole city." We didn't have much money, but for her, I was ready to do anything. The night before her birthday, I stayed late at work just to earn a little extra. My hands were tired, but my heart was happy because I knew how excited she would be. The next evening, I came home with a small pink cake and a tiny doll I had bought from a street shop. As soon as she saw me, she ran to the door like always. "Abu! Abu! Did you bring it?" I lifted the cake box slowly and said, "Close your eyes first." She closed them tightly and covered them with her small hands. When she opened them, her face lit up brighter than the candles on the cake. She hugged me so tightly that for a moment, I forgot all my worries. We cut the cake together, and she laughed and danced around the room. But later that night, something strange happened. While everyone was sleeping, I heard a soft sound coming from her room. I rushed in and saw Aisha sitting on the bed, holding her chest. "Abu, it hurts," she whispered. At first, I thought it was just a small pain. But I had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of the hardest journey of our lives. And what the doctor told us the next day completely broke my heart. The next morning, I took Aisha to the hospital. She was quiet the whole way. Usually she would talk non-stop, asking questions about everything she saw outside the car window, but that day she just held my hand tightly. When we reached the hospital, the doctor checked her carefully. He listened to her heartbeat for a long time. His face slowly became serious. He looked at me and said, "Please wait outside for a moment." Those few minutes in the hallway felt longer than hours. I kept praying quietly. "Ya Allah, please let everything be okay." Finally, the doctor called me inside. He closed the door gently and sat across from me. "There is a problem with your daughter's heart," he said softly. For a moment, I thought I heard him wrong. "My daughter's heart?" He nodded. "She has a serious heart condition. She will need treatment, maybe even surgery." The room started spinning around me. All I could think about was her small smile, her tiny hands holding my finger when she was born, and her laughter while cutting the pink cake just the night before. "How much will the treatment cost?" I asked with a shaking voice. The doctor told me a number that felt impossible for a man like me. I worked day and night just to feed my family. How could I ever afford something like that? When we left the hospital, Aisha looked up at me and asked, "Abu, am I going to be okay?" I forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "Of course, my princess. But deep inside, I was terrified. And that night, I made a decision that would change my life forever. But what I did to save my daughter is something very few fathers would ever imagine doing. That night, I could not sleep. The doctor's words kept repeating in my head again and again. Serious heart condition, expensive treatment, maybe surgery. I sat in the dark living room, looking at Aisha's small shoes near the door. Those tiny shoes reminded me of how she used to run toward me every evening shouting, "Abu." How could I let anything happen to her? The next morning, I went back to the hospital to talk to the doctor again. "Is there any other way?" I asked him. He sighed and said gently, "The treatment must start soon. Waiting could make things worse." Soon. But I had no money. On my way home, I thought about everything I owned. My small house, the old motorcycle I used for work, even my wife's jewelry. That evening, I gathered my family and told them the truth. My wife's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't hesitate for a second. "Sell everything," she said. "Our daughter is more important than anything." Within a few weeks, we sold almost everything we had. The motorcycle, the furniture, even the house. We moved into a small rented room, but I didn't care. All that mattered was Aisha. One night, she sat beside me and asked softly, "Abu, why did we move here?" I smiled and stroked her hair. "Because this place is closer to the hospital, my princess." She nodded and hugged me tightly. But even after selling everything, it still wasn't enough. The surgery cost was much higher than I expected. And that's when I realized I might have to sacrifice something much bigger. Something that could change my life forever. Days were passing quickly, and Aisha's treatment needed to start soon. Even after selling everything we owned, I was still far from the amount needed for her surgery. I felt helpless, like a father who could see his child in danger but had no way to save her. One evening, while sitting outside the hospital, I heard two men talking nearby. They were discussing something that caught my attention. One of them said, "Some people donate a kidney. It saves someone's life, and they get paid for it." At first, I ignored it. But the word stayed in my mind. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A kidney. A person can live with just one, right? If giving one part of my body could save my daughter's life, then what was there to think about? The next day, I quietly went to a clinic and asked about it. The doctor explained the risks. He warned me it would not be easy. But my decision was already made. A few days later, I signed the papers. I didn't tell anyone, not even my wife. I just told her I had found a way to arrange the money. When the surgery day came, I lay on the hospital bed and closed my eyes. The last thought in my mind was Aisha's smile. "Stay strong, Abu," I whispered to myself. When I woke up hours later, my body felt weak, but the doctor told me something that filled my heart with relief. "The money has been arranged. Your daughter's surgery can happen soon." For the first time in many days, I smiled. But what I didn't know was that Aisha had secretly discovered the truth. And what she said to me the next day broke my heart even more. The day after my surgery, I was still lying in the hospital bed, feeling weak and dizzy. But my heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The money for Aisha's surgery was ready. Soon, my little princess would be healthy again. That was all that mattered. In the afternoon, the door of my hospital room opened slowly. It was Aisha. She walked in quietly and sat beside my bed. Her small hand gently held mine. "Abu," she said softly. I forced a smile. "What are you doing here, princess? You should be resting." But she didn't smile back. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Abu, why did you do this?" My heart suddenly froze. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked down for a moment, then whispered. "I heard the doctors talking. I know you gave your kidney. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. I didn't want her to know. I never wanted her to carry that burden. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Abu. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I gently wiped her tears and held her small face in my hands. Listen to me, Aisha, I said softly. A father's body, his strength, his whole life belongs to his child. You are my heart. If giving a piece of me keeps you alive, then it is the easiest decision I could ever make. She hugged me tightly and started crying. That moment, I realized something. My little girl was stronger than I had ever imagined. But the real challenge was still ahead of us. Because the doctors had just told us the date of Aisha's surgery. And it was coming very soon. But what happened on the day of her surgery is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. The day of Aisha's surgery finally arrived. It was the longest morning of my life. The hospital corridors felt cold and silent. I could hear the faint sound of machines and footsteps echoing through the hall. Aisha was lying on the hospital bed, wearing a small blue hospital gown. She looked so tiny, so fragile. But when she saw me, she still tried to smile. Abu, she said softly, when I wake up, can we go to the park again? My throat tightened. Of course, my princess, I replied, trying to hide my fear. I'll take you anywhere you want. Soon, the nurses came to take her to the operation room. Before they pushed the bed away, she reached out her hand. I held it tightly. Don't worry, Abu, she whispered. I'm brave. Those words broke my heart. They slowly pushed the bed down the corridor until the doors of the operation theater closed behind her. And just like that, I was alone. I sat outside the operation room for hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. I prayed quietly again and again. Ya Allah, please protect my daughter. The clock on the wall kept ticking, but the doctors didn't come out. 4 hours passed. Then 5. My heart was beating faster with every second. Finally, the door of the operation room opened. A doctor walked out and looked around the hallway. When his eyes met mine, he slowly started walking toward me. My legs felt weak as I stood up. I was afraid to ask the question, but I had to. Doctor, how is my daughter? He took a deep breath before answering. And the words he said next changed everything. But what the doctor told me in that moment is something no father is ever ready to hear. When the doctor walked toward me, my heart felt like it was about to stop. His face looked serious, and that frightened me even more. I slowly asked, Doctor, how is my daughter? For a few seconds, he didn't speak. Those few seconds felt like the longest moments of my life. Then he finally said, the surgery was very difficult, but we were able to repair her heart. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. She is alive? I asked quickly. The doctor nodded. Yes, but she is very weak. The next 24 hours are extremely important. My knees almost gave way, but I thanked Allah again and again. At least she was still here. After some time, they allowed me to see her. When I walked into the ICU, my heart shattered. My little Aisha was lying on the bed surrounded by machines and wires. Her face looked pale, and her small chest rose slowly with every breath. I gently held her hand. Aisha. Abu is here, I whispered. Her eyes slowly opened. She looked at me and gave a very small smile. Abu, she said weakly. I told you. I'm brave. Tears rolled down my face. I kissed her forehead and whispered, yes, you are the bravest girl in the world. At that moment, I believed everything would finally be okay. But life sometimes tests us in ways we never expect. Because later that night, something happened in the ICU that changed our lives forever. And what my daughter said to me in her final moment is something I still hear in my heart every single day. That night in the ICU was silent. The lights were dim, and the machines around Aisha made soft beeping sounds. I sat beside her bed, holding her small hand, praying quietly. She looked so weak, but when she saw me, she still tried to smile. "Abu," she whispered softly. "Yes, my princess," I replied, leaning closer so she wouldn't have to speak loudly. She looked at me with her gentle eyes and said something that stopped my heart. "Abu, promise me something." "Anything," I said quickly. She took a slow breath and said, "Please don't be sad if something happens to me." Tears immediately filled my eyes. "Don't say that," I said, trying to stay strong. "You're going to get better. We're going to the park again, remember?" She smiled a little. Then she slowly lifted her weak hand and placed it on my cheek. "Abu, you are the best father in the world." Those words broke something inside me. I held her hand tighter and whispered, "No. I'm just a father who loves his daughter." She closed her eyes for a moment, then softly said, "I love you, Abu." Those were the last words my daughter ever spoke to me. A few moments later, the machines in the room started making a different sound. Doctors rushed in, but deep in my heart, I already knew. My little princess, the light of my life, was gone. Years have passed since that night. I am an old man now, but every evening when the sun sets, I still sit quietly and remember her laughter, her tiny footsteps, and the way she used to call me Abu. Because some people leave this world, but they never leave our hearts. Broken